So I've mentioned before that I've got kids. We've got 4 kids back at home, and one of the joys about having kids is reading them stories. And you have to reread stories when you have a lot of kids. We've got 4 kids, and so I'm on my 4th reading of Harry Potter now with my youngest son. He's starting it next week. But one of their favourite stories when they were little was the magic faraway tree stories by Enid Blyton. I don't know if any of you grew up in the UK. Remember? Yes, a few people remember the faraway tree with Joe, Beth, and Franny. Discover a magic tree, and they go up the magic tree and are transported to wonderful lands. And lots of crazy and fun things happen in these magical lands. And one of the places they go to is called the Land of Secrets. The scene is set outside a cave on a hillside. And different people are coming and going into the cave. And inside the cave, the different people share their deepest, darkest secret. And then they leave. Well, a tiny goblin walks up to and into the cave. And I'll let Enid Blyton take over. The goblin had once done a wicked thing and couldn't forget it. He wanted to know the secret to forgetting. And that is one of the most difficult secrets in the world if you have done something really bad. Inside the cave, the goblin speaks to a wizard before coming out and seeing the 3 children. "Did you find out the secret of forgetting?" asked Beth. The goblin replied, "I'll tell it to you because, yes, then if you do a wrong thing, then maybe you can get right with yourself afterwards. It's so dreadful if you can't. The wizard told me inside the cave that if I do 100 really kind deeds to make up for the one very bad one I did, then maybe I'll be able to forget a little and think better of myself. So I'm off to do my first kind deed." "Gosh, it'll take a long time to make up for his one wicked deed," said Joe. "Poor little goblin. It must be awful to do something so wicked and not be able to forget it." No wonder he looked unhappy. Welcome to the world, the land of secrets. Actually, you could call it the land of religion, at least the way many people think about religion. They think that you need to put credit in the bank with God to pay off the debt of the way we've treated God all of our lives. And if you're new to these Living Stories events in the evenings, we've been exploring that a little bit with Jesus Christ. He's been traveling on a journey from the north to the south, from Galilee, where he grew up, to Jerusalem, where eventually he's going to die on the cross. And we've been listening in on some of the famous stories that Jesus told that turned the world around in the 1st century and that continues to turn the world around in the 21st century, And he's en route and he's having loads of different conversations with people as he travels. And he's having different conversations, but tonight he's taking it up a notch. Because so far he's been fairly vague. He's at times been a bit cryptic when he tells stories. He's talked about a man throwing a party and inviting loads of people, and different people come and don't come. He told us about a father who had 2 sons, and the different ways one is running away from their father with autonomy, the other one is estranged from their father by being a conformist, but they're both out of relationship with their father and need to come back. He's told about a lost coin, a lost sheep, lots of kind of slightly abstract concepts. Now, last night we saw that the 2 sons in that lost son story quite naturally map onto the 2 groups of people that Jesus was addressing in his story. And those 2 groups of people were, well, in fact, if you've got your little pink books, we've not picked these up yet, have an open and turn to, let's have a little look here, turn to page 42, big number 15. Big number 15, and we're going to read verses 1 and 2. And this is what we saw yesterday, a bit of recap. It's really important for tonight. So, this was the context for when Jesus told his famous story about the son who runs away and the son who is angry at the way the father treats him. Have a look down. Page 42, big number 15, that's the chapter, and the little numbers are the verse numbers. They were put in way after the Bible was written. But they're kind of helpful tools to find our way around. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Now, someone might say, well, maybe I was reading too much into the passage to map the tax collectors and sinners onto the younger son, which which is what I did yesterday, and the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, the religious, the good guys, onto the older son. Maybe that was a bit too specific. Well, in our passage tonight, we're looking at this last story of Jesus, this living story. We're calling it a story of humility. Jesus puts to bed that view right away because he looks his audience right in the eye and tells them a story about them. So there's no more hypothetical lost sheep, no more hypothetical lost sons, hypothetical banquets. We get a story of two people. And Hannah is going to bring us our reading, please. And it's from Luke chapter 18, so a couple of pages over, page 47, verse 9 to verse 14. Thanks, Hannah.
Hello. Starting at verse 9. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted.
Thanks, Hannah. It's a story of humility. Please keep that passage open. Once upon a time, there was a Pharisee and a tax collector, says Jesus. And immediately, the Pharisees and the tax collectors, who are the people who are around him as he tells these stories, are getting a bit itchy in their seats. The story is about how confident you might be standing before God, how much security you have that you might be listened to and welcomed by him. Now, it may well be that a number of you, maybe many of you, don't actually believe that God exists. That's very possible. But if you've been to any of the other talks, Justin Briley only today and yesterday said that within our culture, increasingly people are more and more disillusioned by the purely naturalistic understanding of reality and everything and are wondering, maybe there is a God after all. And well, for the sake of argument, let's assume there is a God. How confident are you that he would be interested in you, that he would bless you, he would want to smile on you? How secure are you that you would get that kind of response from him? That's a really, really important question if there is a God. You know, on what basis might you expect that? Another important question. So in the story, let's kind of walk through it very briefly, then we're going to pick up some observations. Once upon a time, there were 2 men who go to the temple to pray, and they were like chalk and cheese. One of them, Jesus says, is a Pharisee, at which point you can imagine the confident Pharisees looking on, nodding and kind of rubbing their hands and convinced they're going to know how the story ends. Yeah, these Pharisees going to the temple to pray. And the other is a tax collector. And again, you can imagine those Pharisees nodding and rubbing their hands. These tax collectors, those outcasts. The tax collectors were the lowest of the low in the culture. They were up there, the kind of first century equivalent to the parking attendants or the speed camera operators. Someone's got to do the job, but we can't imagine that it'd be a particularly pleasant job to do. Sorry if that's a bit unfair, but that's what they were. That's how they're treated, but because they were taking money, no one likes people who take money, but they were taking money from their people and giving it to the Roman occupying forces. So it's like being someone who's a Ukrainian taking money from fellow Ukrainians and giving it to the Russian forces over them. But more than that, they were known for being a bit cheeky and skimming off a bit of money for themselves. They were cutting in on their own people. A bit like that dodgy Monsieur Thanier, who's from the master of the house in Les Mis, the one who's always trying to cut in on people, if you know that story. Ripping people off. No one can stand the tax collectors. Well, this Pharisee in Jesus' story launches off into an incredibly respectable prayer, running through his credentials. Impeccable record before God, and his confident whiter than white is surely guaranteed. He's totally in with God, right? And the onlookers, you can imagine, are nodding, yes, well done, amazing. The tax collector, on the other hand, is standing well back, hanging his head in shame in the story, and the onlookers hold tight, waiting for fire to fall from heaven, presumably at this tax collector. Go for it, Jesus. Let rip on this tax collector. We can't wait. You imagine those Pharisees listening in and say. And then Jesus rips the rug from under their feet. I tell you, end of the passage, in fact, the top of page 48, I tell you, this man, the tax collector, the outsider, the one everyone hates, rather than the other, went home justified. Another kind of religious sounding word. It simply means in a perfect, right relationship with God. Eternally secure relationship. What? The tax collector? That guy, the bad guy, gets in, is in the right, is in the eternally secure, confident relationship. Like, how on earth can this be? How could that be? What on earth is going on, Jesus? What are you talking about? He's going to give us 3 super quick lessons about humility. And then we're going to work through this, and then we're going to do a very super quick worked example of this that we see later on in the Gospel of Luke. Okay, so that's the plan. First lesson from Jesus, don't rely, when it comes to a relationship with God, don't rely on bettering others. Don't rely on bettering others. Don't rely on bettering others. In Jesus' story, he explains how the Pharisee is better than other people. Have a look down. He says, God, I thank you that I am not like other people. He just defines himself by what he's not. I'm not like those people, those robbers, those evildoers, adulterers, or even, you can hardly get the word out, this tax collector over here. He thinks, as long as I'm ahead in the race, as long as I'm above, as long as my nose in front, then I'm convinced I'll be fine. I'll find the security. I'll be in God's good books. He's convinced that his security is found by being better than other people. Just get better than other people. If we're honest, I think there's a little bit of this which sneaks into us. We so often think, look, I'm not perfect, but if I'm better than someone else, just be better than them, then surely that's pretty good, God, right? Yeah, I'm not the best, but like, look at all those people that I'm far, far better than. I better other people. I'm more respected. I'm more intelligent. I'm funnier. I'm fitter. I'm more fashionable. If those no hopers, look, seriously, they're lower down the food chain than me. I'm one up on them, and we so often do that. We never say it, but we can be tempted to think that if God, you're going to give out blessings, if you're going to welcome people into your family, if you're going to receive us, surely I've got to be better than someone else. And if I am, then I'm kind of halfway there. That's one way that you get it wrong. And Jesus is saying, don't do that. Don't rely on bettering other people. He also, though, says, don't rely on bettering yourself. As far as kind of getting up with God and getting in his good books, it's not just about kind of being better than other people. It's not even about self-improvement. Again, look in our passage. The Pharisee stood by himself, God, I thank you that I'm not like these other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. All the theological cards are being placed on the table. I must be okay, God. I must be okay with you because look at what I do. I fast. Do you know how hard it is to fast? You've not eaten for 24 hours. I fast so often, twice a week. I give 1/10. I cut in on what I'm doing. I sacrifice. I do this. I do this. I do this. You don't even need to compare yourself with others, says Jesus. Just self-improvement. I read all the good books. I'm a bright, kind person. I discipline well. I do loads of charitable giving. I volunteer at the homeless shelter. God is lucky to have me on his side, thinks the Pharisee. That's going to be the place where security and confidence before God is found. Again, it all sounds so familiar to me. I have to say, I must be okay. I'm doing well in my work. I must be okay with God. Or I source my clothes responsibly. I must be okay with God. I've got a social conscience. I must be okay with God. I better myself. Always trying to improve it. Surely God sees that and says, yeah, okay, yeah, fair dues. That's good enough. That's good enough. That's like that little goblin working on his good deeds, trying to compensate. Okay, yeah, we've made some mistakes, but we've got loads of good deeds we're offering. Look at this. We're better than those. We've contributed these good deeds to take away the wicked, to help me forget the times I failed. Not perfect, but I'm sure I'll make the grade, won't I? And Jesus says, no. That's not how you get into relationship with God. You don't find relationship with God and a confident knowledge that he's going to smile on you by bettering other people, nor by bettering yourself. That's not where we find confidence before God. And we've drastically misunderstood him if that's what we think. You're not going to get confidence by bettering other people in a race or bettering yourself in life. No. Eternal security, confident relationship with God is available, friends. It's really available, but it is to be received as a gift with a bow on it. It's a gift for you from God. It's a free gift. That was the problem with the poor goblin in the story at the start. He thought he could deal with his mess. He could deal with his problem of forgetting. He couldn't forgive himself. He wanted to feel better about himself. Like, that won't do. You may feel better about yourself by working hard, by trying your best, by being a responsible human being. But God has got totally different standards. Instead, you need to rely on God's gift of mercy. That's, I think, our last point. This is a story of humility. The Pharisee has got it wrong. He thinks he's responsible for making this work. He's responsible for brokering a deal with God. You won't find it that way. You'll get no security, no friendship with God that way, trying to better other people or better himself even. Then Jesus concludes the story. Have a look down again in our passage. You can look down, little number 13, right at the bottom of the page. But the fact that the tax collector stood at a distance, he would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. The tax collector has realized something very, very profound. Security before God, relationship with God is not found by lining up alongside other people and being better than half of them, or being in the kind of respectable half, or the impressive half, or even is it found by you contributing all these wonderful good deeds that you've done, tithing and fasting and disciplining yourself to be a better person. No, that's irrelevant. You've got to rely. The only way you can know God's smile, have a relationship with God, is if you rely on his free gift of mercy. You see, it's so tempting, isn't it, in our lives to think that the most important thing is how we square up with other people. So easy. That security and acceptance, and if I'm simply better than them, then I'll be fine. And maybe you will be better than them. Maybe you will. But they won't get you through into a relationship with God, no matter how much better than them you are. How do you square up with him? I, among other things back at home, one that my kind of fun little pastime, I love playing snooker. And I like to think of myself as pretty good. When I lived in Cambridge, I used to play in a snooker club called WT's. And here's a photograph of me playing snooker back in the day. And I used to play, and I was pretty good, could make a decent break. And then I realized that at that snooker club, the then world number one snooker player started coming. And he won the world championships, in fact. Now, I don't know how many of you are into snooker. It's a pretty niche little thing, but the guy's name is Neil Robertson, and there he is standing next to me. And some of you may recognize him, Australian guy. He won the world championships about 10 or 12 years ago. I used to play in this club, and Neil Robertson used to play on the table next to me most weeks with another professional snooker player. There's me thinking I'm pretty decent with my bridge, my cue, I'm making my breaks. And then I kind of look to the side and I see the world number one, world champion, playing on the table next to me. And I suddenly, everything comes back down to size at that point. I'm actually not that good. I'm pretty appalling, in fact, compared with the best person who's playing snooker on the planet right now. And the fact is, it may be that you think, I'm pretty good on the line. There's so many more people who are worse down the line than me. But friends, when we stand next to Jesus, it's like we're standing next to the kind of sporting hero who just dwarfs us, and we're tiny compared with the greatness of Jesus Christ. Morally, perfect, beautiful in his character, consistent in his words, faithful in his love, practicing what he preaches, full of integrity, not a trace of hypocrisy, tender to those who are hard to him. His character just makes me feel I'm nothing. And so, like the tax collector, he thinks, look, what can I do? What does he say? What does he say at the bottom of the page? God, can't even look to heaven. I can't claim anything. I'm not going to claim that I'm better than those people. Can't even look to heaven. Just beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. So aware of what I've done. Sin, it's choosing to be number one in the world that God is number one in. And we push him away and we put ourselves as number one, and it's a shame. It's a horror show when we do that. Pushing people down, pushing ourselves up, leveraging ourselves off them very often at God's expense. It's a wicked way of living in God's world. And so this man says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And how does Jesus conclude the story? I tell you, this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. Justified. The word simply means, well, sometimes people say it's just as if I'd never sinned. I think it's more than that. It's that God treats us just as if I'd been Jesus. He treats me as if I'm never done anything wrong. I've never said or done or thought a single thing out of line. Now, how on earth can that be the case? How on earth can that be the case? How on earth can a good God who's pure, who's just, how on earth can he treat someone like the tax collector as righteous? How can he accept him? Isn't God just? Isn't God fair? To answer that question, we just need to race to the end of these books. And I want us to do that just as we close our time. Because we've been in these stories, these famous stories Jesus told. They were just stories. They were just kind of made-up stories, but with a real punch that they've packed. But we're going to move now, just as we close, as we finish, where Jesus moves from storyteller to savior. And as he arrives in Jerusalem, as he does, he is welcomed as a hero on Palm Sunday. And then just 5 days later, he's mocked. When he's betrayed, he's mocked, he's whipped, he's abused, and then he is brutally killed on a cross. And his last words, according to Luke's gospel, are these: today you will be with me in paradise. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, and we're going to imagine doing a straw poll. We're not going to actually do it, and you can't read on ahead. But who do you think Jesus might say, today you will be with me in paradise too? 4 possibilities. A really good bloke. B, an okay bloke who's been following him for a few years. C, one of the neutral bystanders watching Jesus die. Or D, someone else. His words are, today you will be with me in paradise. They're his last recorded words in Luke. A, is it a really good bloke? B, an okay bloke who's been watching him? C, one of the neutral bystanders watching him die? Or D, someone else? And if you thought D, you were right. So if you flick over to Luke chapter 23, it's on page 60. I'm just going to read this final little bit of Luke's gospel. And it's page 60, and we're reading verse 32 to 43. Let me read these words. 2 other men, so Jesus being crucified, 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, he saved others, let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one. The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, if you're the king of the Jews, save yourself. There was a written notice above him which read, this is the king of the Jews. And here's our key section. One of the criminals, remember 2 criminals crucified with him either side, one of the criminals who hung there hurled insult at him. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God? He said. Since You are under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. And then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, truly I tell you, and here's the line, today you will be with me in paradise. Was it a good bloke? No. Was it an okay bloke? No. Was it someone who'd been watching him? No. It was none of the above. It was a convicted criminal. Other accounts refer these as thieves. Maybe was he even a tax collector who used to thieve? We don't quite know. He's hanging on a cross alongside Jesus, and something that he says leads to Jesus saying, today you'll be with me in paradise. How does that work? 3 things that he says. And we're going to close with these. And this is just going to be really the beginning of an opportunity for you to think through, how might I respond to what God's been saying to me over the course of the week? What 3 things does he say? We've got A, B, C, very simply. A, admit. He admits in his heart. What does he say? We are punished justly. We're getting what our deeds deserve. And so in order to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, we need to say, I don't deserve it. I deserve to be cast away from you, God. You're a good and a righteous God. You don't want people with shameful secrets in your presence. You should rightly cast me away. That's what this man says. I should die for what I've done. Admit. And that's a key part of stepping into a relationship with God, saying, I don't deserve this. I'm not coming to you because I deserve it. I deserve to be cast away. Admitting all the things I've said and done and thought that I can't forget, maybe, in that cave of secrets that you regret. Sorry for what I've done. So that's admit, A. B, believe. So believe, we need to believe that Jesus has done nothing wrong. Can you see? Look again in the passage. It says, we are being, see what it says here? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong. It's an acknowledgement, a belief that when we see Jesus, we see someone who has done nothing wrong. He's someone who blamelessly walked the earth. He is indeed God on earth, come to reveal God to us, to make a way back to God for us. Believe in your heart that he is the Son of God who's come perfectly, blamelessly to die in my place. Admit, believe, and see, confess. The last thing he says, he confesses, he calls out to Jesus, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. I recognize that you alone hold the destiny of my future in your hands. I'm calling out to you. I'm confessing to you. I'm saying, Jesus, remember me. I'm not sure if you've seen this illustration. Imagine this hand represents me. And up there is God in heaven. And this book here represents everything I've done that's wrong, that separates me from God. And there are things that other people know about. There are things that just I know about. Thoughts, words, deeds. It's all in here. But it separates me from God. Here's Jesus. And nothing separates him from God. We admit that we have got things that separate us from God. Jesus, we recognize he has done nothing wrong. When Jesus died on the cross, it's as if Jesus took all the stuff that separates me from God on himself. He dies in my place, taking on himself all the stuff that would keep me from God. And God's anger at that. That's why he dies. And so it's transferred from me so that I now have nothing. It's as if I can think of myself as I've got nothing between me and God. I've done nothing wrong now. I'm treated like I'm Jesus. God treats Jesus like he's you or me. So he can treat you or me like we're Jesus. Admit, believe, confess. Call out to him and say, Jesus, accept me, forgive me, and welcome me into your kingdom. And he will say, today, you'll be with me in paradise. And that's how, in this story of humility, the tax collector can be offered an assured welcome. Not because of what he's done, because of everything that Jesus has done.